Yeah, so welcome to today's video. This is Shanmugaraj. So, as I promised and committed, I'm planning to produce videos on project management and agile series, in addition to leadership series and machine learning, etc. Right. So let's today's video we're going to talk about on artifacts. Right. Artifacts, nothing but an output or deliverable of a particular process or a project phase or whatever it is. Right? So we discussed about that how models and methods acting as an input to the project performance domain is helping you to contextualize and tailor it. Similarly, artifacts are deliverables or output of that performance domains which can be contextualized, can be tailored. Right? There are many categories of artifacts PMBOK 7 is talking about, like strategy artifacts, hierarchy charts, baseline reports, and etc. So far we discussed two categories, strategy and logs and registers. Today we're going to talk about plans. Plans are proposed ways of accomplishing something. How do you want to achieve the course of action or course of things in a scheme of things? You can develop plans for individual aspects like resource management plan, communication management plan, and otherwise you can combine all those plans into an overarching project management plan. So project management plan will become a superset of all these individual plans like scope management, schedule management. That is one of the best way of articulating our project management plan. So let's get into what are the different plans, commonly used plans which you can train in our projects. The first one is a change control plan. Change control plan which establishes the change control board. It documents the extent of its authority, describes how change control system will be, right? So essentially it talks about who is CCP and what are their authority, and it tells that how that change control system will be implemented, right? Essentially how the change control board is formed, how they will control the changes, right? All those activities will be discussed here. The second one is the communication management plan, where it talks about how, when, and by whom the information about the project will be administered and disseminated, right? So simple as that. Who will be communicating when, at what frequency, right? Either it can be a report or it can be any formal and informal communications. Mostly it might talk about formal communication. These are the examples of change control board, right? Change control board receiving the change request, and then it does all these activities like impact analysis, risk analysis, right? It demands that supporting information, and then they decide whether to approve or not. What is the approval? What is the resource allocation, etc., etc. Right? So essentially, the change control plan will tell you that how to uh, organize all these things, how we can implement all these things actually. This is an example of communication management plan, right? So how is that, communication, it's been disseminated, right? Is one of the examples of communication plan. The third plan we're going to talk about is a cost management plan. Describe how the cost will be planned, structured, and disseminated. Iteration plan, nothing but a detailed plan for the current iteration. So cost management plan might cover, look like this or cover these many aspects, right? So it might talk about, organization procedure links, unit of measure, level of precision, level of accuracy, control thresholds, reporting formats, rules of cost performance measurement, process descriptions, right? So it goes like that. This is an example of iteration plan. It talks about what are the stories and what are the task is getting implemented and how do you verify using definition of them. Right? The fifth plan is the procurement management plan. It talks about how the team will acquire the goods and services from outside of the performance organization. So how do I procure from the vendors? What is the process? What is the vendor evaluation process? How would I do the bidder conference? All those information will be captured here. Project management plan talks about how the project will be executed, monitored and controlled and closed. It may be overarching, combining all the individual other plans like procurement and communication, etc. So this is the example of procurement management plan, right? How the type of contract will be used, what are the metrics and insurances, decision criteria, right? How the procurement contracts are coordinated, all those information it talks about, vendor management, right? This is an example of project management plan. It might contain this many subsidiary plans. This must contain the baseline like schedule baseline, cost baseline, and scope baseline. This might talk about change management process. This might talk about selection of the processes. This might talk about the review processes and frequency. Right? So it's a simple plan. How do you organize your project? How do you execute it? How do you control it? Right? So seventh plan is a quality management plan. It talks about how applicable policies and procedures and guidelines will be implemented to achieve the quality objectives. Right? In a general organization, you might have a quality management system. A matured organization has that QMS, right? So it talks about how do you apply the procedures and policies to achieve the quality objectives. The next one is the release plan. Release plan talks about what are the features and dates, outcomes expected to be part of course of multiple iteration, right? A release might contain 4 or 5 iterations. So it will talk about it may be a release roadmap. Talk about every 3 months, right? It may talk about a 3 months or 6 months of a release. It talks about how many sprints or iteration and what are the features will be implemented as part of the release, right? So this is an example of quality management plan. It talks about the quality standards, definition, description, tolerances, acceptable failure rate and notes. This is one example of quality management plan, and this is example of release plan where it talks about every team and its iterations, right? What are the epics is getting implemented, right? So this is how the release plan will look like, right? The other plans include requirement management plan, which is describing how the requirements will be analyzed, documented, and managed. The resource management plan will talk about how the resources will be acquired, allocated, monitored, and controlled. The risk management plan will talk about how the risk management activities will be structured and performed. Right? So all these are examples of requirement management plan. So it talks about what are the different categories, how do you talk about it, how do you maintain the traceability, right? What are the requirement and product metrics you talk about it, how the reporting, validation. So these are the a sample of requirement management plan. This is a sample of resource management plan, right? It talks about team acquisition. It talks about team management, roles and responsibilities, project organization chart, all these things. How do you identify it? How do you acquire it? All that processes. It talk about it. This is an example of a risk management plan, right? One of the part of risk management plan is a rating methodology, right? How do you rate your risks actually? How do you use PI? Right? All those things you can define as part of your risk management. It might talk about how do you source the risk? What are the source of risk? What are the different categories of risk you can source? right? It might talk about different levels of risk, enterprise risk as well as team level risk, project level risk, portfolio level risk. All those things you can discuss in risk management plan, right? The other two are scope management plan and schedule management plan. The scope management plan will talk about how the scope will be defined, how it will be developed, validated, and monitored and controlled. The schedule management plan will talk about the criteria and activities developing, monitoring, controlling the schedules. How do you develop the schedule? How do you monitor it? Right? How do you baseline it? How do you control it? So this is an example of scope management plan. It talks about WBS and WBS dictionary. It's very very important. WBS is very very core uh, aspect of scope management plan. Right? This is an example of schedule management plan. Right? It talks about how do you do the project schedule and how do you track them and monitor them, right? So who will do what are the schedule management roles and responsibilities, right? It's give a decent idea about schedule management plan, right? The final two plans are has been discussed in PMBOK 7 is stakeholder management plan and test plan. The stakeholder management plan identifies the strategies and actions required to promote productive involvement of stakeholders. Look at the words they're carefully using. They're talking about the productive and involvement. It's not about how do you involve them productively into the projects, in decision making and execution. How do you identify the stakeholders? How do you interact with them productively? What are the ways you can ways and means of helping working with them in decision making and etc. Another one is a test plan. It talks about the deliverables that will be tested, how the test will be conducted, what are the process that will be used in testing. Essentially, it talks about the formally testing the components and the deliverables. What are the areas to be you want to formally test and your deliverables, right? That's how the validation of the product validation happens here. And this is the stakeholder management plan. It talks about essential five steps, consulting essentials like stakeholder identification and stakeholder analysis, responsibility, strategy, and priority, and monitoring and reporting. Right? These are the five aspects in stakeholder management plan. This is an outline of test management plan. Right? It talks about test plan, identify references, test item, features to be tested, features not to be tested, you know, pass fail criteria, environmental needs, staffing and training needs, right? Risk and contingencies, all those things you can talk about it in test plan. So with that, we have come to a conclusion of uh, commonly used plans, which are part of project management plan. It can be of plans like iteration or release planning, which is part of adaptive methods, right? So these are it gives a reasonable idea what are the different plans you can incorporate in your project conductance sorry, or project execution or project planning. What are the areas of project management? What are the phases of project management? You can use as many plans you want to have it. So basically, all these plans will help the project manager on how and why and what to be done as part of each individual aspects like risk, communication management, scope management, etc. Right? Hope you got a very good idea about what are the different plans we can create and work out, in our project management scenarios, right? So thanks for your time and effort you're putting to listen to my videos, right? I would like to get your feedback on the areas of improvement. So we'll see you. I see you in next video, continuing my topic on artifacts. Right? So thanks a lot. Bye bye.